I've never been a face-to-face type of person. I solve all my problems with satisfaction, but never through confrontation. I'm happy, and that suits me. However, I have come to realize that this is a concept that my wife cannot understand. I'm Ted Briscoe, and I've been married to Angela for 10 years. Angela is not a dazzling beauty, just an ordinary housewife with brown hair and brown eyes. We have twin daughters who are still in primary school. I work as an insurance agent. Nothing exciting or impressive, but I make good money, and the balance that accumulates will provide for my retirement. I assumed we got married because we loved each other, but now I'm not so sure. Angela seemed comfortable with the way things were for the first few years. I think it was the novelty of being married and having a family. We attended company and neighborhood social events with children whenever we could. Lately, Angela seemed to be attracted to husbands who had important or dynamic jobs. It seemed that the job was not so much about money as it was about prestige. She wasn't like this when we got married, but now it seems to be worse. I began to feel that she was becoming less and less impressed by my status at work or as a husband. To her, my work was not something to brag about. However, it seemed that the big problem was my non-conflict attitude when it came to solving problems. I usually took the quiet solution to most difficulties, which irritated her. She seemed to believe that a real man should face his problems and overcome intimidation. It's a concept I couldn't swallow. I think this is what led to my current dilemma. Please understand that I am not a weakling or a cuckold. I may not seem very manly, but I won't let anyone shit on me. However, I will refrain from direct confrontation with the enemy. My methods sometimes seem unbecoming of a real man, but I am more interested in results than appearance. What people think of me doesn't matter as long as I win. Many of the things I do, a real man would not stoop to under any circumstances. There are things more important than pride. My wife finds this unacceptable. Today, I am sitting in my car, around the corner from my house. The children went to school, and I went to work 20 minutes ago. My job is flexible, so slack-off odd hours are not a problem as long as I get the job done. What I'm waiting for doesn't happen every day, and I'm here in anticipation. I didn't drink coffee at breakfast, so I wouldn't worry about having a leak. Another 20 minutes later, a black and white police car drove slowly down the street and stopped at my door. Frank Perella, one of the best in town, got out of the car and waved to his partner as he drove away. A minute later, Frank walked through my front door. You can see the complexity of my situation. How can a man with my character flaws tolerate his wife having an affair with a police officer? Who should I report this to, and how can I confirm it? I'm sure most people won't approve of what I'm planning, but I'm not like most people, and I don't live to please most people. Anyone who wears blinders that show the qualities of real men will judge me. I don't care because I want results. When I was in elementary school, I suffered from the same weak character traits that I have now. I don't think I developed them. I think I was born with them. I'm sure there's a scientific name for them, but I've never gotten around to looking it up. Of course, I've never had any therapy or anything like that. In 5th grade, I made a good friend named Charlie Higgins. Charlie was the complete opposite of me. He was big, ugly, and always on display. He wasn't really smart, and I quickly discovered that he couldn't read. We spent a lot of time together that year, and by the time we reached 6th grade, Charlie could read as well as anyone in the class. He was always mindful of the special classes and the fact that I did it without anyone noticing. Charlie stayed by my side until we were in 10th grade. It was nice because no one ever bothered me when he was around. He dropped out of school, married a girl, and got a job as a mason's assistant. Charlie soon became the father of a little girl. I followed Charlie, but we did not maintain a close relationship. I kept a low profile after Charlie left, but as fate would have it, I became the target of jock bully Troy manning my senior year. I did everything I could to avoid him, short of running away. I could never surpass him in anything, be it physical or verbal. Being one of the hottest athletes in school meant he received several good football scholarship offers. Like all athletes, his pride and joy was his varsity jacket, which he wore every day, whether it was hot or cold. India ink comes in a cute little square bottle with a short spout. Of course, they are indelible. I had no problem getting a hall pass, and it was a piece of cake to dump an entire bottle of ink through the vents of Troy's locker. You don't have much control in an endeavor like this, but I had enough success to render the jacket unusable for the rest of the year. Of course, school jackets can't just be replaced by a trip to the corner store. Poor Troy had to do without her. No one ever found out who doused him. Unfortunately, the bullying didn't stop, and then Troy started wearing his varsity sweater, just as I expected. It wasn't as impressive as the jacket, but he still used it to strut around. The first part of the preparation was completed. The next day I went to school with a new bottle of ink and a sock with 3 golf balls inside. I don't like pain and I'm not a masochist, but extreme measures were necessary to correct my injustice. Since Troy's locker was next to the boys' bathroom, I planned to linger at the door when he discovered that his favorite sweater was also covered in ink. He was furious, and all the kids in the hallway couldn't help but notice his hysteria. I stood at the toilet door with a smug grin on my face, hoping he would look my way, and sure enough, he did. He hit me. Troy Manning was not only suspended, but also stripped of all his scholarships. No one bothered me until the end of the year. Troy, of course, denied everything. Frank Perella was my new Troy Manning. 2 hours later, a black and white car stopped in front of the house. Frank walked out the front door, and I watched as my loving wife kissed him goodbye. She was wearing a bathrobe. I waited about 5 minutes and entered the house. As I expected, there was water running in the shower. The bed was still in disarray and her clothes were scattered on the floor. Next to the bedside table was a trash can with a light blue plastic bag stuffed into it. That was all I needed to see. I quietly left the house and went to work. When I got home from work that evening, I ducked into the garage and pulled out a blue bag from the trash can. By the end of the second week, I had 10 bags of DNA samples. It's time for the next step of my plan. Frank never came to my house on Fridays. I learned that day he was visiting his mother in a nursing home in the city center. His partner dropped him off at 10 a.m. and picked him up around 11 a.m. I had several clients in the building, and it was not difficult to arrange a meeting with one of them. All seniors look forward to the company, even if it is an insurance agent. The assisted living facility had a security camera at the entrance to the underground garage, but it was the only one. Very few of the residents drove, so most of the cars using the garage were visitors of some sort. One afternoon, I took a long lunch and headed out onto the interstate. There were several adult shops near the entrance ramps. For $20, I bought a set. I asked the salesman if he had any recommendations, and he said he had some tips. This seemed tempting to me. I was ready to go. Angela became more and more gloomy every day. Her contempt for me grew steadily. Wednesday morning was important to my plan. Usually, I avoided her ridicule and teasing, but today I responded. As I was finishing breakfast, she made a snide remark about the fact that I wasn't having sex with her anymore. She walked over my manhood several times. This was what I was looking for. Sorry, dear. Even if your lover is protected, I still don't want to risk contracting the disease. I hope you understand. She stood there with her usual smirk on her face, just looking at me. It's only in the last few months that she started treating me this way. She didn't say anything. It was like she was daring me to say more. I don't think you realize the seriousness of the situation you've put yourself in. The smile on her face suddenly disappeared. She began to fidget a little, and her eyes darted around the room. Now she didn't know what to do. As I started to walk out the door, I turned around and said, "He can't protect you forever." As I left, I noticed a slight fear in his gaze. It worked perfectly. By the time I got to work, there was a police car on my back bumper. I was sitting in my car with the window open when Frank Perella came up. He leaned on the door of my car and gave me the most evil face he could muster. Who the hell do you think you are, moron? My relationship with your wife is none of your business, and I would advise you not to pry into it and keep your mouth shut. If you make any more smart remarks about Angela, I'll make sure you get a good time in Graterford. I'm sure some of the guys there would love to have you as a cellmate. Have I made myself clear? Yes, sir. Great. He gave me one of his confident grins and walked back to the patrol car. I was sure that Angela would call him after I left the house, and I hoped that he would stop me. I turned off the recorder and got to work. It promised to be a good day. Dinner that evening was very quiet. The girls and I chatted a little, but Angela barely said a word. The self-confident, arrogant smile that was on her face disappeared. Every time I caught her looking at me, she quickly looked away. She avoided eye contact at all costs. Until today, she looked at me with slight contempt. I had not even begun to implement my plan, but she began to fear. Even though she might not like me anymore, she seemed to know me. The uncertain future made her feel very uncomfortable. I don't believe there was anything Frank could have said that would have made it go away. I spent the entire day on Thursday preparing for the big day. I found the nearest hospital emergency room and put my lawyer's number on the speed dial. A little rough and painful work on your body should have yielded results. It was about 10 o'clock on the button when the patrol car dropped Frank off at the elevator at the nursing home. A few minutes later, I took the same elevator to see Martha Forbush. Martha was 70 and loved company. I spent about 20 minutes with her and then quietly left. She knew I was there, but her idea of time was a little confused. Once I made it safely to my car, I tore my coat slightly, as well as a couple of belt loops and a seam on my pants. I kept a close eye on the time. Frank seemed to be a punctual guy. I filled a syringe with samples of his DNA from the medicine bottle. There was still some left, so I reached back and smeared it on my clothes. Just in time, Frank stepped out of the elevator, and a moment later the black and whites picked him up. I walked out the back of the garage and dumped all my supplies into the storm drain. Why would anyone watch? Looks like as shocked and unkempt as I could be. I stumbled into St. Joseph's emergency room and announced to the world that I had been bullied. They immediately called the police and the crisis center. I was taken to an examination room, where they stripped me and put my clothes in a bag. I was worried that I might have overdone it. They discovered DNA samples on my clothes. The doctor confirmed and left me with the laboratory assistant. Around this time, the police arrived. They asked the lab technician to leave for a while and then spent 30 minutes getting information from me. When I said that I thought the culprit might be a police officer, the room went silent. Since the DNA of all government employees is recorded for exclusion purposes, the woman investigating the rapes assured me that they would test positive within 24 hours. She was sure that by then all police officers would be acquitted. The hospital notified Angela of what had happened and asked her to bring some clothes to the hospital for me. She delivered the clothes, but didn't bother to check on me or inquire about my condition. After the police left, the lab technician returned. She was a young girl, in her early 20s. She had straight blonde hair and very fair skin with freckles. My name is Ted. Sorry, we weren't introduced. They call me Gilly. My real name is Jillian. She looked at me strangely with a slight smile. I watched as she filled out forms and laid out samples for what would be done with them. Gilly, who will get a copy of the DNA report? The police. This is all? The laboratory will provide certified copies to anyone who wants or needs them. Why are you asking? Could you sign me and my lawyer up for a copy, please? Sure, no problem. Anything else? What do you do with the remaining samples? You know there's an abundance of them. Usually we just throw them away. Why did you ask? Can you tag them or certify the remaining samples and then store them? Certainly. We have secure storage and can guarantee that samples will not be compromised. I think I'm in love with you. Gilly, can you do all this for me? By this time I was dressed and sitting on the edge of the bed. Gilly sat down next to me and smiled. I can take care of everything for you, and maybe even more if you promise to buy me dinner. I'm married. I know, but I bet you won't be married for long. What is all this for? I'm not Brad Pitt. Why are you interested in having dinner with me? I think you are a very smart person, and I want to get to know you better. I think I know what you did today, but I don't know exactly how you did it. I'll keep quiet if you buy me dinner tonight. This was not my plan. I didn't allow it, but I like this girl. Meet me at the Outback at 7. This is a date. Can I call you a taxi so you can go home? Your wife left half an hour ago. My car is in the garage across the road. I think I can get to this place. See you at 7. Apart from the unexpected conversation with Gilly, everything went as I had planned. The next few days will be exciting. Angela was sitting in the living room when I returned home. Thank you for taking my clothes to the hospital. I would appreciate it if you could give me a ride. Sorry, I wasn't sure how long you'd be gone, and I wanted to be here when the girls got home from school. I went upstairs to take a shower. Oh, by the way, I'm fine. There's nothing to worry about. Thanks for asking. Later, when I came downstairs, Angela was still sitting in the same position. She looked at me but didn't say anything. The arrogant grin disappeared. It was only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There were 3 hours left before dinner. I decided to go for a ride. As I backed out of the driveway, the girls were just returning home from school. Dinner was an absolute pleasure. Although everything was quiet and measured, I had a great time. Gilly and I were like a cat and a mouse. I didn't admit to anything, and she didn't tell me about her suspicions. She was raised by her mother and never had a man or father in her life. I got the feeling that she didn't trust men at all and didn't communicate with them. It took us an hour to eat the salad before we ordered our food. We spent the entire evening repeating the same thing. She told me how smart I was, and I told her how insightful she was. We stayed there for more than 2 hours, talking constantly and, in fact, saying nothing. It was wonderful, but only a perverted mind can imagine the joy of it. We promised to meet again on Monday evening. When I returned home, I found Angela sleeping with the girls again. I provided for her and gave her everything. She had thrown it away and now seemed at a loss as to what to do. Frank was married and had his own family. He would leave her in a second, and she knew it. She also knew that I would never take her back. Angela found herself in the center of events, and it made her unhappy. I once loved her, but now there was neither love nor pity. I truly believed that she was afraid of me. Maybe Frank would protect her. I left home early on Sunday morning and was gone all day. I found all sorts of ways to kill time without spending a lot of money. When I returned home around 6, I found the house empty. Angela left me a note. She took the girls and went to visit her parents in Tennessee. There was no mention of when she might return. Most of their clothes were gone. It looked like she planned to stay for a long time. I think I felt relieved. First thing in the morning, I stopped by Seymour Schlump's office. Seymour was a little secretive, but I liked him as a lawyer. He had already received the DNA results from the laboratory by overnight mail. I think it was Gilly's idea. There was no doubt. My criminal was Frank Perella. I explained to Seymour why I sent him a copy of the test results. He said it was a great idea under the circumstances. I gave him a copy of the tape in which the officer Perella threatened me. I told him about the affair I was having Perella with my wife, and gave the times and dates. At 10 o'clock, Seymour and I were at the district attorney's office. 2 impressive men entered the room with folders and tablets. After introducing themselves to each other, they began to explain that they could not continue the investigation because there was no DNA evidence. Seymour began to laugh, and it was difficult for me to keep a straight face. Gentlemen, under the circumstances, we assumed that the DNA test results would be inaccurate, so we sent several duplicates. I know it's a little unusual, but it seemed like it was worth the effort, didn't it? I think it's important to make sure that justice is served, don't you? Seymour pushed 2 copies of the DNA test results across the table to the men who were supposed to represent me. The original was filed at the courthouse at 9 a.m. These are just working copies. I was afraid that the original might get lost again. Seymour was good. That's why I hired him. The district attorney and his assistant sighed at the same time and seemed to sag in their chairs. Did you know it was Frank? Perella? Even before we entered this room, right? None of them answered the question. After a few seconds, the district attorney began speaking. Why would Frank Perella, an outstanding and decorated officer, do this? I'm sorry, but this is unthinkable. Seymour smiled from ear to ear. At the officer's Perella had an affair with Mr. Briscoe's wife, Angela. This went on for several months. His partner can confirm this. When Mr. Briscoe came face to face with his wife and asked her to stop, she immediately told Frank Perella. Then the officer Perella and his partner stopped Mr. Briscoe in their patrol car, and the officer Perella threatened to send Mr. Briscoe to prison if he did not drop the subject. The district attorney leaned back in his chair and smiled. This is the biggest nonsense I've ever heard. You will never convince me or the jury that this ever happened. Finally, I had enough. I raised my hand to Seymour, indicating that I wanted to talk. I leaned over the table and looked the DA straight in the eye. You're supposed to be on my side. This is the second time in 10 minutes that you have concluded that I am a liar. If you do this again, I will file a huge lawsuit against you and the entire city with a huge amount of media coverage. Sit here, shut up, and listen. When the recording ends, I expect an apology from both of you. I pressed play on my recorder. Seymour leaned back in his chair and smiled. Who the hell do you think you are, asshole? My relationship with your wife is none of your business, and I would advise you to keep your nose out of it and keep your mouth shut. If you make any more smart remarks about Angela, I'll make sure you get a good time in Graterford. I'm sure some of the guys there would be happy to have you as a cellmate. Am I clear? I sat back in my chair and let Seymour take the lead. You will recognize Frank's voice, Perella, or do we need an expert to confirm it for you? Maybe the Internal Investigations Department would be interested in this case. I immediately received apologies from both gentlemen. Seymour and I apologized and got up to leave. Call me when you've collected your thoughts and we'll talk again. Seymour was good. Also, before the end of the day, I would like to get an injunction to keep all uniformed police officers away from Mr. Briscoe. The situation appears ripe for retribution. 2 people in suits just sat and watched us leave. Gilly and I had a great time at the Olive Garden that evening. She wanted me to go to her place for a nightcap, but I chickened out. Maybe next time, I told her. Somehow the whole story was leaked to the local newspaper. They didn't hide any of the names of the people involved, including Angela. It didn't matter much since she wasn't there, and I doubted she would ever return. However, it mattered to Frank's wife Perella and her 2 brothers-in-law. Frank was beaten and didn't say who did it. Things weren't going well for Frank. In the end, he was forced to admit his guilt. He received 5 years, but avoided publicity from the trial. He was to serve his sentence at GW in Graterford West. This is where they sent white-collar criminals and dirty cops. Among ordinary people, Frank would be in big trouble. Which brings me to my old friend Charlie. Some time ago, some idiot harassed Charlie's wife, and he ended up in the hospital. Charlie ended his time at GW because they had a Mason school. He spent 2 years in a maximum security colony, teaching a group of prisoners how to lay bricks. I visited Charlie's wife, Josie. Their daughter Sarah graduated from high school and was accepted into dental hygienist school in Boyertown. The only problem was that she had to pay $6,000 for tuition. With Charlie in prison, the family had to depend on Josie's income. I knew all this in advance, so I came prepared. I gave Josie a check for tuition and a sealed envelope. I asked her to give the envelope to Charlie the next time she came for a date. Seymour prepared and mailed divorce papers to Angela at her parents' home in Bristol. I gave her child custody and monthly child support, but not child support. Her infidelity was well documented and Seymour took care of it. Jilly and I discussed the possibility of me trying to get custody, but we both agreed that I was too unstable to be an effective father. I got along really well with both of mine daughters, and sometimes I felt that I was closer to them than their mother. Jilly and I were kindred spirits. Wow, that's deep. She's the only girl I've ever felt comfortable with. I didn't tell her all my secrets, and she didn't share hers with me, but somehow we became close. Since Angela was no longer around and would soon be out of my life forever, I felt no remorse about sleeping with Jilly. She moved into my house. The house was a rental, so that wouldn't be an issue during the divorce. She wasn't a very good cook, but she was good at almost everything else. We often ate out. Gilly had a mysterious aura about her. I found out about this later. Angela signed and returned the papers almost immediately. She didn't ask for anything and didn't even hire a lawyer. In 3 months, I will be free. I didn't have to stay here until the end. Gilly and I spent a lot of time discussing the possibilities of moving. We wanted it to be a little warmer, but not too hot. We decided it would be nice to go without snow, but we still wanted 4 seasons. Getting a translation from my company would not be a problem. Jilly could find a job almost anywhere. Huntsville, Alabama seemed like the perfect location. It was near Nashville and Chattanooga, and taxes were high. A good house could be bought for half the price of most other places. We both started getting ready. Before leaving, I found out that Frank Perella was beaten. The guards assumed that this was some kind of revenge from the prisoners with whom he had previously been in contact. I received a nice letter from Charlie thanking me for the help I gave to Sarah. He also thanked me for Josie. I didn't tell Charlie, but Seymour was working to get his sentence reduced. Up to this point, everything was going as planned. We didn't expect a phone call from Angela's parents. Ted, this is Mary, Angela's mother. Sorry to bother you, but we need help. What kind of help? What's the matter? Angela doesn't care about girls. She doesn't even come close to them. She claims that they are demons and are angry at her because of what she did to you. This sounds abnormal. She refused to tell us what exactly she did to you that they were upset about. In fact, she practically refuses to talk about anything. We really need your help. Other than that, is she okay? No. She sits in her room all day with the door locked. I have to bring her food. She seems afraid of her own daughters. What do you want me to do? You should come and pick up the girls. We can take care of Angela, but not the girls either. Fine. We will be passing through Bristol on Saturday. We'll stop and we'll pick it up there. Let everything be ready. Thank you, Ted. We appreciate it. I explained to Gilly that I was not cut out to be a parent. With my quirky personality traits, girls would grow up to be just as quirky as me. On the outside, I seem normal, but on the inside, I am far from it. It wasn't fair to expose 2 innocent girls to such an environment. After a few hours, she decided we should give it a try. Jilly will be a stay-at-home mom. For some reason, I got the feeling she was expecting this. We rented a small house west of Huntsville for 1 year. The internet is a great invention. Our furniture and other things were supposed to be delivered shortly after we got there. Bristol was just on the way. Jilly was nervous about meeting the girls. I was nervous about my upcoming meeting with Angela. However, things didn't work out as expected. I couldn't tell Gilly that my daughters were a little unusual. They were not ordinary little girls, just as their father was not a normal man. It was something I tried to ignore, but was always aware of. Angela's parents greeted us with a sigh of relief. We entered the house, and when Angela saw me, she immediately ran to her room and locked the door. I don't think I was worried about anything. I decided to leave everything as it is. Gilly was standing in the living room when my 2 daughters approached. They looked at each other for a few seconds, and then a wide smile appeared on all 3 faces. I felt like they were having a private joke, and I was left out. However, I was very pleased with the first meeting. The girls walked up to Gilly, and each of them hugged her legs. something they had never done with their mother. Jilly placed a hand on each of their heads and smiled. Gilly, I would like to introduce you to my daughters, Lilith and Sibylla. I had a strange feeling that there was no need for an introduction. I think the next few years of my life will be very interesting. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.